hold on, let me bring it back again. This is in from John, and he wants to know, according to UK Guardian, the budget deficit to surpass Greece is worse in EU. European Commission's spring forecast puts the UK budget deficit this year at 12% of GDP. That's the highest in the European Union and worse than Treasury estimates. In addition to the election uncertainty, is UK the next Greece, and does IMF have enough capital to cover all the countries that are in trouble?
The EU could be next. The UK could be next. But it's a toss-up between them and Ireland and Portugal. And I will say, I think there's this distinct possibility that once England does get in permanent trouble, we'll call it, that I think they'll break away from the EU. And I think they'll put up tariffs on goods and services. And so I hope I'm right, because it's the best thing they could do for themselves. They, like we, have had their manufacturing jobs in particular wiped out by free trade, globalization, offshoring, and outsourcing. An interesting part of that question, and I cover it in tomorrow's issue, is where's all the money going to come from? Just for the governments that need to roll the paper they've got and issue new paper, we're talking about $4.5 trillion this year, 45% of which has to be purchased, has to be floated by the U.S. government. And so it's obvious where it's going to come from. And I said early in the program, Bank of England has been buying 75% of British gilts, as they're called, treasuries. And the Fed has been buying 80% of U.S. paper. So we're going to have giant inflation. And so that should carry through next year. And I figure by the end of next year, or thereabouts, everything's going to blow sky high and we're going to spiral into a deflationary depression. And during that period of time, the countries we've mentioned are going to go under. There's 19 of them right now, but there'll be more. Because these are only important countries. I mean, will Belize go under? Will Uruguay go under? You know, smaller countries. Probably. So the numbers are going to be pretty high, and that's why they'll have multilateral devaluations and debt default. And it's coming. And if you're not in gold and silver, you're going to be left out with nothing.
You know, Bob, you mentioned that they should be putting tariffs on, just like you mentioned. But you know what? They're not going to do with what they should do. You know, they're just going to let it go. And you know, what you say is going to happen. And it's going to, you know, it's so there isn't anybody to do anything up there, you know. They're just going to continue to, this is on a course, and I don't think it's going to it's going to play out.
This planned lowering of countries to have a meeting where they all devalue and they all default has been blown sky high. Simply because the people in Greece said, no, we're not going to do it. We don't care whether the government passed it or not. Well, it'd be interesting to see if they stand behind that. Could end up in civil war, where, you know, the public starts killing the police and the military and everything else. And that's happened in Greece before. So we haven't seen the real nastiness of this thing yet.
So here's the question from Chuck. He says he wants to hear our comments on the timing of yesterday's equity free fall. At roughly the same time, Mr. Bernanke appeared before the Senate to to admonish any attempt of a congressional audit.
Maybe it was a warning. I mean, who knows? We're all backing into possible scenarios. But it could have been them doing that.
Hold on. Keep talking, Bob.
I am talking.
I just gotta... Sorry for that noise, folks. It's, I had my office window open and kind of like an 80-mile-an-hour wind. Running.
Wow.
So...
Well, everything, happens in Pennsylvania.
Yes, they know where you're at.
Home of the groundhog.
You know what, Bob? It is interesting. I mean, it is amazing that they can come and point fingers and say that was a glitch. In fact, someone called me. I had talked to one of my customers, and before they even announced that they were said it was a glitch, he had said earlier, I bet they blame it on a glitch. And, he was right. He's pretty smart. Here's a question in from Roman. He says, after the Dow plunged yesterday, he looked at the daily chart on the USDX and compared it to the daily chart on the euro dollar. The USDX is skyrocketing, while the euro dollar looks like it fell off the page. Anybody know how the Brotherhood of Darkness is using the euro dollar to rip off the world? He supposes the euro dollar crash is attributable to a computer glitch also.
I can't answer that one. I answered that to him by email. I just don't have an answer. I'm not, that intimate with that market.
This question then from, what's the end game of these staged global events? Is this just reaping of what has been sown? And what grand event will be staged to cover up all this mess?
Yeah, the whole thing's going to go into the can, so that's where it's all headed, and that's what they're doing. It's the only way they can keep control, and by having wars. And that's what they're going to try to do. And we know what they're going to do, and they're not going to make it.
Here's a question in from Richard. It's a little lengthy. He says he's been watching the markets for decades. Congress knew about Social Security, Medicare, etc. problems and has done nothing. And yet they come up with the same crap every year about cutting taxes, spending, put everything on the table, etc. And over these decades, everything they touch just gets worse. The economy is all fraud. All government data is BS. People who put money in stocks through 401k, pensions, etc., are going to lose it because it is invested by the scum Wall Street fund managers who prop up the market. Did you see the article, how congressmen bet on the market sinking? Let's see. He says, Bob, forget about trying to influence voters to throw the bums out. They're too dumb. When they lose everything, they will finally get it. And they'll take it to the streets as you suggested. He says, your thoughts. And he goes on just to add this real quick. He says, P.S., he's watched the Goose, Kramer, and Kudlow, and they are. And they said that the Greek problems are their problem, which does not affect us. Do you believe these idiots? Do you believe they went to Harvard and Yale? What you want for a 40,000-year tuition? So what do you say?
There's a possibility he's right about the public. We'll find out. But there's an awful lot of people finding out what's going on, so we may be able to pull it off. It beats shooting people.
Yeah, it certainly does. Here's another question in from the on capital gains taxes. He wants to know, this is from David. He read recently that the Australian government was considering a 40% capital gains tax on mining companies. Do you believe that the U.S. government will eventually attempt to do this? Is this just a self-confiscation of precious metals?
I think that Australia might have a tax. You got to remember that that's a big industry there, whereas it's not that big an industry in the United States. And so I would think that in Australia they might have a 10%, 15% tax, which I think is not very good, but that's what I think it will end up. But I don't think they'll have one in the U.S.
We discussed this question the other day, but he missed it. So isn't it true that J.P. Morgan is not concerned about their short position in gold and silver blowing up because they're acting on behalf of the U.S. government, and that the U.S. taxpayers are ultimately on the hook for their losses if the metal market blows up?
Well, that's true, but I think because of what's taken place